In Nigel Kneale's adaptation of 1984, the problem of authority has already been solved. That is what makes this work so unsettling within his body of work. In Quatermass, authority fails through haste, denial, arrogance, and finally exhaustion. In the year of the Sex Olympics, it succeeds at the wrong thing, maintaining itself while abandoning ethics. In 1984, there is no failure at all. The system functions exactly as intended. This is not a story about institutions breaking down under pressure. It is a story about institutions that have removed pressure entirely. There are no competing jurisdictions, no committees paralysed by hesitation, no uncertainty about who is in charge. Everything is aligned. That alignment is the horror. Kneale's adaptation is often discussed in terms of its shock value, its impact on audiences, or its place in early television history. But what matters here is how precisely it fits into his long argument about authority. This is what happens when authority stops hesitating. The world of 1984 is not chaotic. It is administratively immaculate. Surveillance works, language works, punishment works, even resistance works, because it has been anticipated and absorbed into the system. There is no improvisation required. Kneale understands immediately that Orwell's world is not primarily about cruelty. It is about efficiency. The party does not terrorize indiscriminately. It calibrates. Fear is distributed carefully at the correct level to maintain stability. Violence is not emotional or excessive. It is procedural. This is authority perfected. In this adaptation, Kneale strips away any temptation to see the story as melodrama. There is no grand villainy, no sadistic relish. What we are shown instead is a system that has refined power into routine. People disappear not because someone is angry, but because their absence simplifies the structure. Language is controlled not to deceive, but to limit the range of thought that needs managing. Surveillance is constant, not because of paranoia, but because it removes uncertainty. Everything has a purpose. Placed alongside Kneale's later work, 1984 functions as a kind of negative endpoint. Quatermass warns us what happens when authority cannot decide. Sex Olympics shows us what happens when authority decides without ethics. 1984 shows us what happens when authority no longer needs justification at all. There is no argument left to make. The brilliance of Kneale's adaptation lies in how little it adds. He does not rewrite Orwell, he does not soften or sensationalize, he does not search for metaphor. Instead, he recognizes that Orwell had already described the logical destination of the processes Kneale himself has been critiquing. This is not speculative fiction, it is administrative logic taken to its extreme. What makes the adaptation so oppressive is its banality. The world is grey, orderly, and drained of excess. Emotion itself becomes inefficient. Even rebellion is proceduralized. Winston Smith's journey is often read as tragic because he fails, but Kneale frames it differently. Winston does not fail because he is weak. He fails because the system has already accounted for him. His resistance is not threatening, it is useful. The party allows dissent because dissent reveals itself. It draws people into visibility where they can be processed. There is no need for chaos or brutality. The system absorbs deviation and neutralizes it. This is authority without blind spots. In earlier Kneale dramas, catastrophe erupts because institutions refuse to acknowledge something outside their frameworks. Here, nothing exists outside the framework. Reality itself has been brought into line. Truth is not debated, it is manufactured. Memory is not contested, it is edited. Language does not evolve, it is engineered. What Kneale recognizes and emphasizes is that this level of control requires immense competence. This is not the fumbling bureaucracy of Quatermass or the cynical management of Sex Olympics. This is authority that has learned from every previous failure. It does not hesitate, it does not deny, and it does not exhaust itself. It endures. This makes 1984 a crucial piece in a Kneale season, even though it is an adaptation rather than an original work. It shows the end state of the problem he has been circling for decades. If Quatermass is about warning and Sex Olympics is about corruption, 1984 is about inevitability. There is no sense here that exposure will help. Truth is irrelevant. The system is not interested in persuasion or legitimacy. It does not need consent, it needs compliance. And compliance is achieved not through fear alone, but through exhaustion and enclosure. People are worn down, not terrorized. They are isolated, not confronted. This is perhaps the most chilling insight Kneale draws from Orwell. That total control does not feel dramatic, it feels dull. The adaptation's famously intense reception is often attributed to its brutality, but the brutality is not the point. What disturbed audiences was the recognition of a world where resistance had no structural effect. That recognition fits perfectly with Kneale's long-standing pessimism about institutions. Once authority stops failing, it becomes unstoppable. The tragedy of 1984 is not Winston's fate, it is the absence of any meaningful alternative. There is no underground, no future uprising, no hidden flaw waiting to be exploited. The system has closed the loop. Kneale does not present this as a warning that can still be heeded. He presents it as a condition that has already been achieved, conceptually, if not politically. That is why this adaptation feels so stark. It's not asking what if, it is asking what then. What happens when authority perfects itself? The answer is not constant violence or visible oppression. The answer is a world where meaning itself is administered. Placed within Kneale's body of work, 1984 reads less like a departure and more like a destination. This is where the refusal to hesitate leads. This is where efficiency without ethics ends. This is where institutions go when they finally stop pretending to serve anything beyond themselves. In that sense, Kneale's adaptation is not just faithful to Orwell, it is necessary. It completes an argument about authority that begins with procedural panic and ends with procedural perfection. And between those 2 points lies the entire moral landscape of modern television drama. By adapting 1984, Kneale shows that the most frightening systems are not those that collapse, but those that function flawlessly. Because when authority no longer fails, there is nothing left to resist, only something left to endure. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed that. Plenty of Nigel Kneale shows covered in this channel. There is a playlist that's just completely Nigel Kneale. So I shall link that at the end of this video. And I will be back on another day with another television show. Bye.